Rookie nurse fired for touching a military VIP. Then the Pentagon called the hospital.
Who authorized that contract nurse to touch that patient? Find out!
Hospital Administrator Donald Vickers barked from the security office, slamming his palm against the monitor showing room 847. Elena Ramirez stood in colorful scrubs covered in cartoon cats, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, breathing steady while everyone else panicked. On the bed lay a man they called John Doe, 3 weeks comatose, no family, no identification, just another tragedy the system forgot. Except when Elena leaned in to check his foresight, she saw what nobody else had noticed. The calloused hands of someone who'd carried weapons professionally, the healed shrapnel scars on his shoulder blade partially hidden by hospital gown, and the faded tattoo behind his ear that had been deliberately lasered but not quite erased. The kind of ink special operations soldiers removed when they went dark. Her fingers found his pulse, and she felt something that made 30 years of medical training scream wrong. This heartbeat belonged to someone in peak physical condition, not a malnourished homeless man like his chart claimed. Vickers shoved through the nurse's station and pointed at Elena like she'd committed murder. "You don't touch restricted patients without physician authorization, you stupid woman." Elena didn't argue because she'd already seen the medication orders that would kill this man in 6 hours. The drug combination so perfectly designed to look like natural complications that only someone with combat medicine experience would catch it. Vickers ripped her hospital badge from her scrubs with enough force to tear fabric. "You're terminated effective immediately. Get your things and get out of my facility." Elena turned to leave, hands steady, face calm. The way you stay calm when you've held dying soldiers and made promises you couldn't keep. And that's when every phone in the hospital died simultaneously, the silence so complete it felt like the building held its breath. Then the red emergency line rang once, sharp and violent, and the night receptionist picked up only to go completely pale and whisper the FBI is on the phone and they're asking for the nurse you just fired. If you've ever been fired for doing the right thing, if you've ever seen something wrong and spoken up anyway, if you've ever wondered whether one person can actually make a difference against a system designed to silence them, then drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and smash that subscribe button, because this story is about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the grandmother everyone underestimated. It was 11:43 on a Tuesday night when the world forgot how to be normal. The VA hospital sat on the edge of Virginia like a concrete promise the government made to veterans and then quietly tried to forget, fluorescent lights humming that particular frequency that made everything feel slightly unreal, hallways smelling like industrial cleaner, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into walls after decades of suffering. Elena moved through her rounds with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 40 years in medicine, stopping at each room to adjust blankets and check vitals and ask questions nobody else bothered asking because she genuinely cared about the answers. The night shift nurses loved her because she brought homemade tamales and remembered their children's names and never made anyone feel stupid for asking questions. The veteran patients loved her because she understood things civilians didn't, the way certain sounds made them flinch, the nightmares that woke them screaming, the guilt that ate them alive for surviving when their brothers didn't. What nobody knew was that Elena understood because she'd been there, had worn the uniform, had made the same impossible choices in field hospitals where the only difference between living and dying was how fast your hands could move and whether you were willing to break rules to save lives. She reached room 847 and paused outside the door the way she always did, that small moment of preparation before entering a space where death waited patiently. John Doe had been there 3 weeks, transferred from a DC hospital after being found unconscious near a metro station. No wallet, no phone, no identification, just a body the system labeled and forgot. His chart said malnutrition and dehydration and possible drug overdose, but Elena had been bothered by him from the first day because nothing about him matched that story. His muscle tone was too good, his skin too healthy despite weeks of immobility, his hands showing calluses in places that suggested weapons training, not homelessness. She'd mentioned it once to the attending physician, Dr. Raymond Cole, and he'd smiled that charming smile that made residents worship him and said, "Elena, you have such a compassionate heart, always seeing the best in people. But sometimes a homeless man is just a homeless man." Except Elena had learned decades ago that when something felt wrong, it usually was, and every instinct she developed keeping soldiers alive in Iraq was screaming that this patient was a lie wrapped in hospital sheets. She entered quietly and moved to his bedside, adjusting the monitors that beeped their steady rhythm, checking the four that dripped clear fluids into veins that shouldn't have been this resilient. That's when she saw his hands properly for the first time, really saw them under the fluorescent light that made everything look like truth couldn't hide. The knuckles showed old fractures healed without proper medical care, the kind of injuries you get from close-quarters combat when your fists become weapons and adrenaline makes you forget pain. His palms had calluses in the specific pattern made by carrying rifles for extended periods. The webbing between thumb and forefinger thickened from thousands of hours of weapons training. Elena had seen hands like this before, had operated on them, had held them while their owners died, begging her to tell their families they'd died heroes. She reached for his wrist to check his pulse, and that's when she saw the scar, faint but unmistakable, the surgical pattern used by military doctors removing shrapnel in field conditions. She'd made that exact incision pattern herself in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in places whose names were still classified. Her fingers found his pulse, and she felt her breath catch, because this wasn't the weak thread of someone who'd been comatose for weeks. This was strong, steady, controlled, the pulse of an athlete, of a soldier, of someone whose body had been trained to survive conditions that would kill normal people. Elena's mind raced through possibilities while her hands moved through practiced motions, checking his arms for track marks that weren't there, checking his neck for signs of strangulation that didn't exist, checking everything the intake doctors should have checked, but apparently hadn't. That's when she found the tattoo, partially hidden behind his left ear where hair would normally cover it. A design that had been deliberately lasered to obscurity, but still showed faint outlines if you knew what to look for. Special operations units often removed identifying marks when they went undercover, when their faces and bodies couldn't carry evidence of who they really were. Elena had treated enough of them to recognize the pattern, the specific way laser removal left shadows of what used to be. She pulled back his hospital gown slightly to check his shoulder, and that's when training and instinct collided with terrible recognition. Shrapnel scars, multiple entry points, healed with surgical precision by someone who knew combat medicine, patterns that matched wounds from IED blasts, from mortars, from the kind of violence that happened in places Americans pretended didn't exist. This man wasn't a homeless John Doe. This was a Tier 1 operator, someone who'd spent years doing things that would never make the news, someone important enough that his real identity had been erased and replaced with a cover story so thin it wouldn't survive basic scrutiny. Elena's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for his chart and started reading with the kind of attention surgeons reserve for patients who might die if they miss something small. The medication orders looked routine at first glance, standard protocol for coma patients, except Elena had spent enough time in military medicine to know when combinations were designed to look normal while actually being lethal. Someone had ordered a drug interaction that would cause respiratory failure in approximately 6 hours, dosed perfectly to appear like natural complications from his condition, timed to happen during the chaos of morning shift change when nobody would question one more tragedy. Elena's blood went cold because she'd seen this before, had been ordered to falsify autopsy reports to hide murders disguised as medical mistakes, had refused, and lost everything for telling truth nobody wanted to hear. She pulled the 4 line immediately, disconnecting the drip that was slowly poisoning this man, her movements quick and decisive despite her hands wanting to shake. A young resident passing the door stopped and stared. "Ma'am, what are you doing? That's physician-ordered medication." Elena's voice came out calm and absolute. "These medications will kill him. The interaction causes respiratory depression. Whoever ordered this either doesn't know basic pharmacology or knows it too well." The resident's face flushed. "You can't just discontinue a doctor's orders. I need to call the attending." Elena met his eyes. "Yes, you do. Call Dr. Cole right now. And while you're at it, call pharmacy and have them verify this drug combination because I'm not reconnecting this until someone explains why we're killing a patient." The resident ran, and Elena stood there beside John Doe's bed knowing she'd just ended her career again, knowing that speaking up had cost her everything once before and was about to cost her again, but unable to stay silent when she could see death being administered drop by drop through plastic tubing. Dr. Raymond Cole arrived within minutes, that charming smile already in place, his reputation as the hospital's most beloved physician preceding him like armor. "Elena, what's going on? I heard you disconnected Mr. Doe's 4. Elena handed him the chart. "These medications, this combination, it's going to cause respiratory failure." Cole's smile never wavered. "Elena, I appreciate your diligence, but these are standard protocols. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. Elena's voice stayed level. "I've been practicing for 40, and I know a lethal drug interaction when I see one. This patient will stop breathing in approximately 6 hours if we continue this regimen." Cole's eyes hardened just slightly, just enough that someone who'd spent decades reading people in high-stress situations would catch it. "Elena, you're a nurse, not a physician. Perhaps you should leave the medical decisions to those qualified to make them." That's when Hospital Administrator Donald Vickers arrived, because someone always calls administration when liability smells like it's entering the building. He was the kind of man who wore authority like expensive cologne, who saw patients as billing codes and nurses as interchangeable labor, who'd spent 20 years climbing bureaucratic ladders by never taking risks and never admitting mistakes. He took one look at the disconnected 4, and his face went red. Who authorized this? Who gave a nurse permission to override physician orders? Elena tried to explain calmly. "Sir, this medication combination will kill the patient. I'm requesting pharmacy verification before we continue." Vickers cut her off. "You're requesting nothing. You're a contract nurse who just committed gross insubordination. You don't question doctors. You don't make medical decisions. You follow orders." Elena felt something old and familiar rising in her chest. The same feeling she'd had 15 years ago standing in front of a military tribunal, trying to explain why she couldn't sign reports she knew were lies. "With respect, sir, I'm a registered nurse with 40 years' experience, and I have a professional obligation to advocate for patient safety." Vickers stepped closer, voice rising. "Your professional obligation is to do what you're told. This patient is under Dr. Cole's care, and if you can't follow simple instructions, then you don't belong in this hospital." The hallway had gone quiet, nurses and residents gathering to watch, some looking sympathetic, most looking terrified because they knew what happened to people who challenged authority in places like this. Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm not reconnecting that 4 until someone from pharmacy verifies these medications are safe together." Vickers made a decision, the kind of decision small men make when they feel their power questioned, the kind that feels satisfying in the moment and catastrophic in retrospect. He reached out and ripped Elena's hospital badge from her scrubs with enough force to tear the fabric, the sound of Velcro separating loud in the sudden silence. "You're terminated effective immediately," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Security will escort you from the premises. You are banned from this facility. If you return, I will have you arrested for trespassing." Elena stood there holding her badge, this small plastic rectangle that represented decades of caring for people nobody else wanted to care for. And she didn't cry because she'd learned long ago that tears were a luxury you couldn't afford when staying calm meant surviving. She looked at John Doe one more time, at this man whose real name she didn't know, but whose life she'd just tried to save, and she turned to walk away because what else could she do? What else had she ever been able to do except try and fail, and try again anyway? Security met her at the nurse's station, 2 guards who looked embarrassed because they'd eaten her tamales and asked her advice about their own medical problems. But orders were orders, and Elena didn't make it difficult because she understood they were just doing their jobs. She walked through the corridor with her head up, past the residents who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the nurses who looked like they wanted to say something, but didn't because mortgages and families and fear made cowards of good people. She reached the lobby, and that's when the world tilted sideways, when normalcy cracked and revealed something darker underneath. When every phone in the hospital went dead simultaneously like someone had cut a wire the building didn't know it needed. The silence was total and wrong, the kind of quiet that precedes violence. And then the red emergency phone rang once with a sound like bones breaking, and the night receptionist picked it up with hands that were already shaking. She listened for maybe 5 seconds before her face drained of all color, and she looked up at Vickers, who was following Elena, to make sure she actually left. "Sir," she whispered, but her voice carried anyway in that awful silence. "The FBI is calling. They're asking for Dr. Elena Ramirez, and they say if she's been terminated, we need to reverse it immediately because she just stopped an assassination attempt on a federal witness." The lobby went silent in that special way buildings go silent when everyone realizes they're in the middle of something bigger than themselves. Vickers grabbed the phone from the receptionist, shaking hands. "This is Hospital Administrator Vickers. Who am I speaking to?" His voice tried for authority, but landed somewhere near panic. He listened for maybe 10 seconds, and his face transformed from red anger to white terror. "Yes, sir. Yes, she's here. No, she hasn't left the building yet." He lowered the phone slowly like it weighed 100 pounds. "Dr. Ramirez, the FBI needs you to stay exactly where you are." Elena turned around, not surprised, just tired. "The title is nurse, not doctor. I don't use my MD anymore." Vickers blinked. "You're a physician?" Elena didn't answer because 3 black SUVs were already pulling up to the emergency entrance, doors opening before the vehicles fully stopped, federal agents pouring out wearing tactical gear that said this wasn't a courtesy visit. Special Agent Sarah Chun entered first, credentials already out, 39 years old with eyes that had seen too much and a jawline that suggested she didn't negotiate often. She scanned the lobby, locked onto Elena, and walked straight to her, ignoring everyone else like they were furniture. "Dr. Elena Ramirez?" Elena nodded once. Agent Chin's expression shifted slightly, something Elena couldn't quite read. "The patient in room 847, John Doe, you pulled his 417 minutes ago." "Yes." "Why?" Elena's voice stayed level. "Because the medication combination would have caused respiratory failure in approximately 5 hours. Whoever ordered it either doesn't know pharmacology or knows it perfectly." Chin's jaw tightened. "That patient isn't John Doe. His name is Sergeant Major Marcus Hewitt, Delta Force. 22 years service. He was supposed to testify before Congress 3 days ago about defense contractor corruption. Someone tried to kill him 3 weeks ago, and we've had him in protective custody ever since." Elena absorbed this without visible reaction. The medications were the second attempt. Chin nodded. "We've had intelligence for 12 hours that there's a killer inside this hospital, someone on staff being paid to finish what the first assassin started. We were planning to extract Hewitt tomorrow morning, but you just forced the killer's hand by stopping the poisoning. Which means they know we're onto them, and they're going to move fast." Elena's mind was already calculating. How many people knew his real identity? Chin's voice dropped. "Inside this hospital? For people, the administrator, the attending physician, the charge nurse, and the security chief. One of them is the assassin." Vickers pushed forward, sweating now. "This is insane. My staff are vetted professionals. You can't just accuse people of murder." Chin finally looked at him, and her expression could have frozen fire. "Your hospital has been harboring a federal witness under false identity for 3 weeks, and someone on your staff has been slowly poisoning him. We can accuse whoever we want." She turned back to Elena. "Dr. Ramirez, we need your help. You're the only person who caught the poisoning, which means you understand military medicine and you're not compromised." Elena shook her head. "I'm not military anymore. I was discharged 15 years ago. I'm just a contract nurse." Chin's voice softened slightly. "We know exactly who you are, Captain Elena Ramirez, Army trauma surgeon, 2 tours Iraq, dishonorably discharged for refusing to falsify autopsy reports covering up a friendly fire incident that killed 12 soldiers." Elena's hands clenched. "How do you know that?" Chin met her eyes. "Because my brother was one of those 12 soldiers, Private First Class David Chun. He was 19 years old, and you tried to save him. You tried to tell the truth about what happened, and they destroyed your career for it." The lobby could have heard a heartbeat. Elena's voice came out barely above whisper. "I couldn't save him. I'm sorry." Chin's eyes were wet, but her voice stayed steady. "You tried. You're the only one who tried. Everyone else signed the lies and moved on with their careers and promotions while you lost everything. Now I'm asking you to try again. Help us protect Hewitt. Help us find the killer before they finish what they started." Elena looked at the hospital, at Vickers, who was pale and speechless, at the residents watching through the glass, at room 847 where a soldier was dying because someone valued money more than honor. "What do you need me to do?" Before Chun could answer, the hospital emergency alert system screamed to life. "Code Blue Room 847. Code Blue Room 847. Elena ran. She ran like she was 30 again, like her knees didn't ache and her back didn't hurt, and time hadn't stolen the speed she used to have. Chun and 3 agents followed, weapons drawn, moving through corridors that had become a tactical situation without warning. They burst into room 847 to find medical team already working, Dr. Cole leading the resuscitation, residents scrambling, nurses pushing medications, chaos that looked professional but felt wrong. Elena shoved through. What happened? A young nurse stammered. He just started coding. Vitals crashed. We don't know why. Elena looked at the monitor, looked at the 4 that had been reconnected, looked at Dr. Cole's hands moving with practiced efficiency, and saw the truth like lightning. Stop. Everyone stop right now. The room froze. Chen's weapon came up. Elena pointed at the 4 bag. That's not saline. Someone switched it. He's being poisoned right now. Cole's hand stopped moving for half a second, so brief most people wouldn't notice, but Elena had spent decades reading micro-expressions in high-stakes situations. Dr. Cole's voice stayed calm. Elena, you're not staff anymore. You need to step back. Agent Chen moved between them. Nobody moves. Everyone stay exactly where you are. She radioed for backup. I need crime scene techs to room 847 immediately, and I need that 4 bag tested. Cole finally showed emotion, a flash of something cold in his eyes. This is absurd. I'm trying to save this patient's life. Elena's voice cut through. Then why did his vitals crash 30 seconds after you reconnected the 4 I specifically disconnected? Cole's smile was thin and wrong. Because you created an unstable situation by stopping his medications. This is your fault. Chen stepped forward. Then you won't mind if we test that for fluid. Cole's hand moved toward the bag like he was going to disconnect it. 3 agents' weapons came up simultaneously. Step away from the patient. Cole froze, calculating, and Elena saw the moment he made his decision. His hand darted to his coat pocket, and Chen fired. Not to kill, to stop, the round hitting Cole's shoulder and spinning him backward. He hit the floor and came up with a syringe, clear liquid that Elena knew instantly would be lethal, and he lunged toward Hewitt's foreport. Elena threw herself between them, her body becoming a shield, and Cole's momentum carried him into her, both of them crashing into the medical cart. The syringe went flying. Agents tackled Cole, and Elena ended up on the floor with cracked ribs and the absolute certainty that she'd just saved a soldier's life the same way she'd failed to save David Chen 15 years ago. Chen knelt beside her. Are you okay? Elena nodded despite the pain screaming through her chest. Check the 4 bag. Test everything he touched. Crime scene techs arrived and started processing while agents hauled Cole to his feet, blood soaking his expensive shirt, his charming mask completely gone. He looked at Elena with pure hatred. You self-righteous bitch, you think you're saving him? You think this ends here? There are a dozen more like me. The program doesn't stop because one operator failed. Chun tightened her grip on him. What program? Cole laughed, bitter and sharp. Ask her. Ask Captain Ramirez about programs that kill soldiers for profit. She knows all about friendly fire that isn't friendly and equipment that fails on purpose and reports that get falsified to protect contracts worth billions. Elena felt ice in her stomach. What are you talking about? Cole met her eyes. The same defense contractors you tried to expose 15 years ago, the ones who sold faulty ammunition that killed your entire unit. They've expanded. They've been selling defective equipment to special operations for a decade and silencing anyone who notices. Hewitt found proof, 17 Delta Force operators dead from equipment failures that were actually sabotage, and he was going to testify. The room went completely silent. Chen's voice was deadly quiet. Names, I want names right now. Cole shook his head. Not without immunity, but I'll tell you this. One of the people who ordered Hewitt's death is standing in this room right now. Everyone looked at everyone else. The charge nurse backed toward the door. The residents looked terrified. The security chief's hand moved toward his radio. And Vickers went absolutely white, his face showing guilt so obvious a child could read it. Chen's weapon swung toward him. Administrator Vickers, hands where I can see them. Vickers raised his hands shaking. I didn't kill anyone. I swear. I just looked the other way. They were blackmailing me. They found out I'd been embezzling funds, and they said if I cooperated they'd keep quiet. Chen's face showed pure disgust. You let them murder a soldier to hide your theft? Vickers was crying now. I didn't know they'd try to kill him. I thought they just wanted access to his medical records. I thought. He couldn't finish because Elena stood up despite her broken ribs, walked over to him, and slapped him so hard his head snapped sideways. That soldier survived 2 decades of combat, just to almost die because you're a coward. Chen pulled Elena back gently. We've got him. He's going to prison for a very long time. Elena shook her off and moved to Hewitt's bedside. His vitals were stabilizing now that the poisoned for was removed, his breathing improving, and as Elena checked his pupils, she saw his eyes moving beneath closed lids. He's waking up. Chin moved closer. Already? The antidote works fast. Elena prepared medications. He's fighting to consciousness, which means he's been aware this whole time, probably heard everything. Hewitt's fingers twitched. His breathing changed. And then his eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening with the kind of clarity that comes from years of training to wake up ready for combat. He looked at Elena, at Chun, at the agents, his gaze cataloging threats and allies in seconds. His lips moved, trying to form words. Elena leaned in. Don't try to talk yet. You're safe. You're in a hospital under FBI protection. Hewitt's hand suddenly grabbed her wrist, grip strong enough to hurt. His eyes locked on hers with desperate urgency. He forced out 4 words that made Elena's blood freeze. They're still here now. The lights died. Complete darkness. Emergency backup didn't engage. Someone screamed. Then gunfire erupted from the hallway. Not handguns, automatic weapons. The sound unmistakable to anyone who'd been in combat. Chin shouted orders. Get down. Everyone down. Secure the witness. Elena threw herself over Hewitt's body, becoming a human shield, while bullets chewed through the doorframe and agents returned fire. This wasn't a hospital anymore. This was a battlefield. And somewhere in the darkness, the Real killers had just arrived to finish what Cole couldn't. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like strobe lights, painting violence in freeze frames. Elena pressed herself over Hewitt's body while bullets punched through medical equipment and shattered monitors and turned the room into a killing zone. Chun was shouting into her radio, but static was the only answer because someone had jammed communications. 3 agents returned fire from the doorway while 2 more dragged the bed away from the entrance. Elena's hands moved on autopsy, checking Hewitt's lines, making sure nothing critical got disconnected, because she'd seen soldiers survive combat only to die from something as simple as a displaced 4. Hewitt's grip on her wrist tightened, and he pulled her down close enough to whisper. For shooters, automatic weapons, train movement, not hospital security. Elena's heart hammered. How do you know? His eyes were sharp despite weeks in a coma. I can hear their footwork. Delta doesn't forget. He tried to sit up, and Elena pushed him back down. You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. You can't even walk. Hewitt's face hardened. Then give me a weapon, because lying here makes me a target, and anyone near me dies. The gunfire stopped suddenly, silence worse than noise, the kind of quiet that meant professionals were repositioning. Chun crawled over to Elena. We need to move him. They're going to breach this room in less than 2 minutes. Where? Chun looked around desperately. Supply closet, stairwell. Anywhere that's not here. Elena shook her head. He can't be moved. His vitals are barely stable. Transporting him now could kill him. Then we make a stand here, Chin said grimly. Against 4 trained shooters with automatic weapons? Elena met her eyes. We don't have to win. We just have to survive until backup arrives. How long? Chin checked her watch. SWAT is 12 minutes out. Local police are 8 minutes. Hewitt's voice cut through. We don't have 8 minutes. They're coming now. He was right. The door exploded inward, breaching charge that turned steel into shrapnel. Smoke filled the room. 2 shooters entered in tactical formation, weapons up, night vision making them predators in the dark. Chin fired twice, dropped one. The second shooter lit up the room with automatic fire, and an agent went down screaming. Elena did something insane. She grabbed a metal bedpan and threw it at the shooter's head. Not to hurt him, to distract him. And in the half-second he flinched, Chin put 2 rounds center mass. He dropped, but 2 more were already coming through the smoke. Elena pulled Hewitt's bed behind a concrete support column, the only real cover in the room, her body still shielding his. You need to let me fight, Hewitt said through gritted teeth. You need to stay alive so you can testify, Elena snapped back. A shooter rounded the column, and Elena was suddenly face to face with a man in black tactical gear, his weapon coming up. And she didn't think. She grabbed the 4-pole and swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with his faceplate hard enough to crack it, and he staggered. Chin shot him before he recovered. 3 down. 1 left. But the 4th shooter was smart, staying in the hallway using the doorframe for cover, firing controlled bursts that kept everyone pinned. Chun was bleeding from her arm. 2 agents were down. The young residents were crying, and Vickers was curled in a ball whimpering. Elena's mind raced. This wasn't random. This was extraction or elimination, and whoever sent them wanted Hewitt dead badly enough to assault a hospital in the middle of Virginia. which meant the conspiracy was bigger than defense contractors. This was government-level corruption. She looked at Hewitt. What did you find? What's worth killing this many people for? Hewitt's face was grim. Project Valkyrie, black budget program. 17 Delta operators dead over 3 years, all from equipment failures that weren't failures. The contractors were selling defective gear, taking kickbacks, and anyone who noticed got eliminated. I have proof, names, bank accounts, everything. Where? Hewitt tapped his head. Memorized, they can't delete what's in here. That's why they want you dead. He nodded. And why they'll keep coming until I am. The fourth shooter made his move, tossing a flashbang that exploded in white light and deafening sound. Elena's world went silent and bright, her training screaming through the disorientation. She felt rather than saw the shooter entering, felt Hewitt trying to push her aside, felt Chun moving to intercept. Then the lights came back on. Emergency power finally engaging, and the sudden illumination caught the shooter exposed in the middle of the room. Chun fired. He went down. Down. Silence crashed over the room, broken only by ringing ears and ragged breathing. Elena checked Hewitt first, then the wounded agents, her hands moving through triage she'd performed in field hospitals half a world away. 2 agents would live if they got treatment fast. The residents were terrified but unharmed. Vickers had wet himself, but survived. Chun was on her radio, backup frequencies finally working. Officers down, need medical and tactical support. For shooters neutralized, witness is secure. Elena bandaged Chin's arm while listening to approaching sirens. Who sends 4 trained operators to kill 1 witness? Chin's face was dark. Someone with enough power to think they'll get away with it. Hewitt spoke up, voice getting stronger. General Richard Kaplan, Joint Chiefs, he's the one who approved the faulty equipment contracts, took $12 million in kickbacks, ordered the hits on everyone who knew. If I testify, he goes to prison for the rest of his life. Elena felt the pieces falling into place, the same pattern she'd seen 15 years ago when she tried to expose the friendly fire cover-up. The same power structure protecting itself, the same willingness to sacrifice soldiers for profit and reputation. How many people has he killed? 17 operators confirmed, Hewitt said. Maybe more. The friendly fire incident in Iraq, 12 soldiers dead from faulty ammunition. Was that him too? Elena asked quietly. Hewitt met her eyes. The same contractors, the same general approving purchases, the same pattern. You tried to expose it, and they destroyed you instead. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, 15 years of guilt and anger and grief finally having a target. He killed David Chun. He killed all of them. And he's still in power. Hewitt nodded. Not if I testify. Chun looked between them. Then we get you to Washington, we put you in front of Congress, and we burn down everyone involved. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. SWAT team entered, weapons raised, then lowered when they saw the carnage. The team leader looked at the 4 dead shooters. Who are you people? Chin showed her credentials. FBI, protecting a federal witness. These men were sent to kill him. The team leader's eyes widened. In a hospital? Welcome to how far they'll go to protect secrets, Chin said grimly. She turned to Elena. You saved his life twice tonight. The poisoning and the assault. Without you, he'd be dead. Elena shook her head. I just did what I was trained to do. Chin's voice softened. You did what you've always done, protected soldiers when everyone else looked away. The team leader was coordinating evacuation. We need to move the witness now. This location is compromised. Where are you taking him? Chin asked. Undisclosed federal facility. Full protection until he testifies. Elena started to step back. Her job done, but Hewitt grabbed her hand. Don't leave. I need someone I can trust. You don't know me. Hewitt's eyes were certain. You covered my body with yours when the shooting started. You're either crazy or you actually care about keeping soldiers alive. Either way, I trust that more than anyone else right now. Chin nodded. She's right. You should come with us. You're the only medical personnel who knows his real condition and you're already targeted. Staying here makes you a liability. Plus, Elena hesitated. This isn't my fight anymore. Hewitt's voice was hard. It's been your fight since they killed your soldiers and blamed you for trying to tell the truth. This is your chance to finish what you started 15 years ago. Elena looked at the dead shooters, at the blood on the floor, at Chin's face showing the same need for justice Elena had carried like a wound for 15 years. What about my job? Vickers spoke up from where he sat in handcuffs, voice broken. You don't have a job here. I fired you, remember? Chun smiled coldly. Actually, she's now a federal contractor under witness protection, and you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, so your opinion doesn't matter. She looked at Elena. What do you say? Help us take down the people who've been killing soldiers for profit? Elena thought about David Chun dying at 19. About 12 soldiers whose families never got the truth. About 17 Delta operators murdered by equipment designed to fail. About every veteran she'd ever treated who survived war only to be betrayed by the system supposed to protect them. She looked at Hewitt. If I do this, I want the truth on record, every name, every death, every lie. I want it all exposed. Hewitt nodded. That's exactly what I'm planning to testify. Then let's go to Washington. And let's make sure General Kaplan regrets ever thinking soldiers were expendable. The armored convoy rolled into Washington 3 days later with Elena sitting beside Hewitt in the back of a vehicle designed to survive explosives and bullets, and the kind of attacks governments pretend don't happen on American soil. Hewitt had recovered faster than anyone expected because Delta Force operators were built different, trained to push through pain and weakness that would hospitalize normal people. Elena had spent 72 hours monitoring his vitals while FBI agents guarded every door, and Chin coordinated with Justice Department lawyers building a case that would shake the Pentagon to its foundation. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a secure congressional chamber, closed session, only essential personnel, cameras banned because what Hewitt was about to reveal couldn't be allowed to leak before indictments were sealed. Elena wasn't supposed to be there, but Chun had pulled strings, argued that the medical professional who saved the witness twice deserved to see justice delivered. Really, it was because Chun knew Elena needed this, needed to watch the system that destroyed her finally face consequences. They entered through underground parking, surrounded by agents with automatic weapons, moved through corridors that smelled like power and old money and secrets kept in filing cabinets nobody was cleared to open. The hearing room was smaller than Elena expected, just a long table where 5 congressional representatives sat looking grave and important, and a witness chair where Hewitt would sit and speak truth that would end careers. General Richard Kaplan sat in the gallery flanked by expensive lawyers, 63 years old with silver hair and a chest full of medals and the kind of face that had spent decades ordering people around and never hearing the word no. He looked at Hewitt with cold calculation, at Elena with dismissive contempt, at Chun with the barely concealed hatred powerful men reserve for people who refuse to be intimidated. The committee chair called the session to order. Sergeant Major Hewitt, you're here under oath and under federal protection to provide testimony regarding defense contractor irregularities. Hewitt's voice was steady and clear. Not irregularities, sir. Systematic murder disguised as equipment failures. 17 Delta Force operators killed by defective gear sold to special operations with approval from General Richard Kaplan, who received $12 million in kickbacks from the contractors. The room exploded. Kaplan's lawyers were shouting objections, representatives demanding evidence. Chun calmly presenting documents that had been secured from encrypted servers and offshore accounts, and the kind of paper trails people thought they'd hidden well enough. Hewitt continued speaking like he was delivering an after-action report. The pattern started in 2019, faulty parachutes that deployed late, night vision equipment that failed during operations, body armor with defects that allowed through-and-through penetration. 17 operators died, all classified as training accidents or combat losses. All families told their soldiers died serving their country. He paused, jaw tight. They did die serving, but they were murdered by the contractors who sold them defective equipment and the general who approved the purchases knowing the gear would fail. One of the representatives, an older woman with kind eyes, asked quietly, "How do you know the general knew?" Hewitt looked directly at Kaplan. "Because I was part of his security detail 2 years ago, I saw the quality control reports that flagged the defects. I saw him meet with contractor executives. I heard him say on a phone call that acceptable losses were part of business and 17 operators was statistically insignificant compared to the profit margins." Kaplan stood up, face red. "This is slander, I demand." The chair cut him off. "General Kaplan, you'll have opportunity to respond. Sit down." But Kaplan wasn't sitting down because powerful men who've never faced consequences don't believe consequences are real, even when they're staring at them. He pointed at Hewitt. "This man is a traitor. He's fabricating allegations to avoid court-martial for his own misconduct." Chin stood up. "General Kaplan, Sergeant Major Hewitt has provided banking records showing 12 million transferred from contractor accounts to offshore holdings you control. We have emails. We have recorded phone calls. We have testimony from 3 contractors who've agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. Kaplan's face went from red to white. Those records are classified. You have no authority. Chen smiled without warmth. The records were declassified by executive order 2 hours ago specifically for this hearing, and we have all the authority we need. Kaplan looked around the room like he was searching for allies and finding none because nobody wanted to be associated with a sinking ship. His lawyers were already whispering about plea deals and damage control and the kind of calculations that happen when guilty people realize they're actually going to prison. Elena watched it unfold, feeling something she hadn't felt in 15 years, vindication, the bitter satisfaction of watching the system finally work the way it was supposed to. The committee chair looked at Elena. Dr. Ramirez, you're listed as a medical witness. Is there something you'd like to add? Elena stood up, hands steady. 15 years ago, I was an Army trauma surgeon serving in Iraq. I treated casualties from a friendly fire incident that killed 12 soldiers using faulty ammunition from the same contractors we're discussing today. I was ordered to falsify autopsy reports to attribute deaths to enemy fire instead of equipment failure. I refused. I was dishonorably discharged, and my career was destroyed. The chair's face showed recognition. You're the surgeon from the Fallujah incident, the one who tried to report the defective ammunition. Elena nodded. The same contractors, the same pattern of selling defective equipment, the same general approving purchases. This has been happening for 15 years and nobody stopped it because the people profiting had enough power to silence anyone who tried to tell the truth. She looked at Kaplan. 29 soldiers total, 12 in Iraq, 17 in Delta, 29 families who were lied to, 29 graves that could have been prevented if anyone with authority had cared more about lives than profit. The room was silent. Chen added quietly, Dr. Ramirez saved Sergeant Major Hewitt's life twice, once from poisoning and once from an assault team sent to kill him in the hospital. Without her, none of this testimony would be happening. The committee chair looked at Elena with something like respect. On behalf of Congress and the United States military, I apologize for what was done to you 15 years ago. Your service and your integrity deserve better. Elena's voice stayed level. I don't need an apology, sir. I need those 29 families to get the truth about how their loved ones died. The chair nodded. They will, I promise you that. He turned to Kaplan. General, you're relieved of duty effective immediately, pending court-martial for conspiracy, fraud, and negligent homicide. Federal marshals will take you into custody. Kaplan tried to run. Actually tried to bolt for the door like he was going to escape, and 2 marshals tackled him before he made it 3 steps. They cuffed him while he shouted about his service record and his connections, and how they couldn't treat him like a common criminal. Chen leaned close to Elena. 29 families are about to get closure because you refused to stay quiet. Elena shook her head. Because Hewitt had the courage to come forward, because you believed him, because sometimes the system actually works. Chen smiled. The system worked because people like you forced it to. 6 months later, Elena stood in Arlington National Cemetery at a memorial service for the 17 Delta operators whose deaths had been reclassified from training accidents to line-of-duty murders. The families were there, finally told the truth, finally able to grieve properly. Hewitt was there in dress uniform, recovered fully, preparing to return to active duty. Chun was there representing the FBI investigation that had expanded to 17 other contractors and resulted in 43 indictments. And Elena was there as the guest of honor, the woman who'd saved a witness and exposed a conspiracy and finally gotten justice for soldiers who'd been failed by the people sworn to protect them. A mother approached her, maybe 60 years old with kind eyes and a folded flag. My son was one of the 17, she said quietly. They told me he died in a training accident, that it was just bad luck. I'm so sorry, Elena said. The mother shook her head. Don't be sorry, be proud. Because of you I know the truth. Because of you the people responsible are in prison. Because of you my son's death wasn't meaningless. She hugged Elena and walked away, leaving Elena standing there with tears finally falling after 15 years of holding them back. Hewitt walked over. You okay? Elena wiped her eyes. 29 families have answers. General Kaplan is serving 30 years. The contractors are bankrupt and their executives are in prison. I'm okay. What about you? Hewitt smiled. I'm going back to Delta, back to the work, back to keeping people safe. What are you going to do? Elena thought about it. The VA had offered her job back with full benefits and an official apology. Congress had introduced legislation named after her requiring independent review of all military equipment purchases. The Army had offered to restore her rank and clear her discharge record. But what she really wanted was simpler. I'm going back to nursing, back to taking care of veterans, back to doing what I've always done. Hewitt nodded. The world needs more people like you. People who can't be silenced. People who fight for what's right even when it costs everything. Elena looked at the rows of white headstones, at the graves of soldiers who'd served with honor and been betrayed by the system. I'm just a nurse who refused to look away. Hewitt's voice was firm. You're a hero who saved lives and exposed corruption and proved that one person standing up can change everything. That's not just a nurse. That's exactly what this country needs. Elena walked through the cemetery alone after the service ended, stopping at the grave of Private First Class David Chun, the 19-year-old who died in her arms 15 years ago. I kept my promise, she said quietly. I told the truth. It took 15 years, but the truth finally mattered. She placed flowers on his headstone and stood there feeling peace for the first time since Iraq. Her phone buzzed. Text from her daughter who she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, the daughter who'd been ashamed of her dishonorably discharged mother. The message said, Mom, I saw the news. I saw what you did. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm proud of you. Can we talk? Elena typed back yes, walked out of the cemetery into sunshine that felt warmer than it had in years. She'd lost everything once for telling the truth. She'd been fired, humiliated, discharged, abandoned. But she'd also saved 29 families from living with lies, put corrupt officials in prison, and proven that integrity matters even when the cost is everything you have. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes power protects itself. Sometimes good people get destroyed for doing the right thing. But sometimes, if you're stubborn enough and brave enough and refuse to be silenced, the truth wins. And that's worth everything. If this story just proved that one person's courage can expose corruption that destroys lives, that age and job titles don't determine who can be a hero, that speaking truth to power costs everything, but silence costs your soul, that nurses can be warriors and warriors can be caregivers, and both are equally valid expressions of strength, that 15 years of waiting for justice is worth it when families finally get truth, that the system only works when people force it to, then subscribe right now and join everyone who believes that ordinary people doing extraordinary things are what change the world, that grandmothers in scrubs can take down generals, that one voice refusing to be quiet can become a chorus that demands accountability.